In this quiet space of Dreamtime Science, we turn down the volume of the universe to hear its subtlest secrets. Let's explore the cosmos at the perfect pace for peaceful contemplation. You know what's fascinating? The way carbon quietly journeys all around us, weaving through the air, the soil, and even inside our own bodies. I've been thinking about how this invisible dance of carbon keeps life humming on Earth. And there's something truly remarkable about how connected everything is in this cycle. Tonight I'd love to share that story with you, one that shows how something so small can be so essential to everything we know. Your support through likes and subscriptions keeps this tranquil laboratory of knowledge glowing softly. Tell me in the comments, what scientific concept has always fascinated you? Let's prepare for tonight's journey. Find your most comfortable position, let tension float away from your body, and take 3 slow, peaceful breaths. Beneath the surface of our world, beneath the green hush of forest canopies and the shimmer of ocean waves, there is a story written not in words, but in atoms. It is a tale that predates language, predates humanity, a story that is, in a sense, the very ink with which all life is inscribed. It is the story of carbon, the element whose paradoxical invisibility and ubiquity have made it both a mystery and a companion across eons. Carbon, to the untrained eye, is easily overlooked. It does not dazzle with the metallic sheen of gold or the fiery radiance of phosphorus. Instead, it lingers quietly, sometimes as a whisper of graphite on a page, sometimes as the diamond's hard, clear promise, but more often as something unseen, diffused through air, wound into the filaments of plants, or hidden in the bones and breath of every living creature. It is Earth's invisible ink, tracing lines from the deep past to the present moment. The journey of carbon is, at its core, the carbon cycle, a grand, ceaseless migration of atoms, shifting between forms, between reservoirs, between life and stone, between air and ocean. To speak of the carbon cycle is to reach for a story that is at once intimate and planetary. Each breath you take, each morsel you consume, each tree that sways gently in the wind, these are all chapters in the Carbon Chronicle. Let us begin for a moment in the hush of a primeval forest, where morning sunlight filters through ancient trees, and the air is thick with the scent of moss and leaf mould. Here, carbon is both guest and host. It rides in on the wind as carbon dioxide, a colourless, odourless gas that slips unnoticed between the stomata of leaves. Within the emerald machinery of chloroplasts, the miracle of photosynthesis unfolds. Carbon dioxide is drawn from the air, water is drawn from the soil, and the sun's energy is captured and stowed away in the bonds of sugar. In this act, the green world becomes a kind of alchemist, turning the formless into the formed, the invisible into the tangible. Yet the story does not end with the leaf. The sugars forged by sunlight fuel the growth of stems, roots, and fruits. They become the flesh of berries, the core of wood, the energy that powers the quiet stretch of a fern as it unfurls. Herbivores graze or browse, and in their mouths carbon begins its next journey, through the bodies of animals, through the slow process of digestion, through the restless dance of metabolism. With every breath these creatures exhale, carbon is returned to the air, a cycle complete yet never finished. But there are deeper pathways, more secretive journeys. The forest floor is littered with leaves that have fallen, with twigs and bark, with the bodies of insects and birds who have reached the end of their stories. Here, in the cool shadow of the soil, decomposers, bacteria, fungi, 1,000 quiet scavengers set to work. They break down what was once alive, returning carbon to the air as gas, or locking it away in the slow accretion of humus and peat. Some of this buried carbon, over the course of millions of years, will be pressed and transformed into coal or oil, fossilized sunlight waiting patiently beneath the ground. The carbon cycle, then, is not a simple circuit, but a labyrinth of interlocking passages. Carbon moves swiftly through the air and living things, but lingers for centuries or millennia in rocks, soils, and the deep ocean. It is a cycle that connects the breath of a child with the whisper of ancient forests, the flame of a candle with the bones of long-lost creatures. It is no wonder that carbon has held our fascination across cultures and ages. In the ancient world, before the periodic table was even a dream, people recognized the mysterious duality of carbon's forms. The Greeks called graphite writing stone and marveled at its ability to leave marks on papyrus. Diamonds, by contrast, were considered tears of the gods, fragments of stars, or talismans of immortality. The transformation of black charcoal to clear, indestructible diamond was a metaphor for alchemy, for change, for the hidden unity of nature. As centuries passed, our understanding deepened. The French chemist Antoine Lavoisier, in the late 18th century, gave us the word carbon from the Latin carbo, meaning coal. He demonstrated that plant matter, when burned, released a gas, what we now call carbon dioxide, and that this gas was part of the air itself. This insight was revolutionary, for it revealed that the atmosphere was not empty, but a dynamic reservoir, an active player in the theatre of life. Lavoisier's work was the beginning of a new way of seeing. No longer was carbon merely the residue of burning or the mysterious core of diamonds. Instead, it became a connector, linking the chemistry of the earth, the air, and the living world in a great invisible web. In popular culture, carbon has played many roles, sometimes hero, sometimes villain. The phrase carbon footprint has become a part of our daily vocabulary, a measure of our impact on the planet. In science fiction, carbon is both the building block of alien life and the fuel for interstellar journeys. The carbon-based life form is a trope that reminds us, with a touch of humility, that all our complexity is built upon a scaffold of simple atoms arranged in endlessly intricate patterns. Yet for all its centrality, carbon is often misunderstood. There are myths that swirl around it, misconceptions that obscure its true nature. Some imagine that carbon is inherently dirty, synonymous with pollution and decay. Others see it as something to be feared, a harbinger of climate catastrophe. In truth, carbon is neither enemy nor savior. It is simply essential. Without carbon, there would be no proteins, no DNA, no sugars or fats, no trees, no birds, no people. The confusion in part arises from the different forms in which carbon appears. The carbon in your body is not the same as the soot from a chimney. The carbon in a leaf is not the carbon in a lump of coal. What matters is the context, the way carbon is bound, the molecules it forms, the pathways it travels. Carbon dioxide, for example, is vital for life, yet in excess it can tip the balance of Earth's climate. Charcoal can purify water or blacken a landscape, depending on how it is used. Consider too the modern myth that carbon is something we must simply eliminate to save the planet. In reality, the goal is not to remove carbon, but to keep it cycling in ways that sustain life. The true danger lies not in carbon itself, but in its imbalance. When ancient stores are released faster than they can be reabsorbed, when the cycle's equilibrium is disturbed. There is poetry in the way carbon moves, a slow dance between sky and sea, between root and leaf, between the living and the dead. The oceans, vast and mysterious, play a role as carbon's silent partner. Carbon dioxide dissolves into seawater, where it can remain for centuries, or be taken up by tiny plankton, who spin it into shells and skeletons. When these creatures die, some sink, carrying carbon into the deep ocean, where it is locked away, sometimes for millennia. The ocean is both a highway and a warehouse for carbon, a place where the element's journey is slowed but never truly ended. Beneath our feet, in soils and sediment, carbon finds yet another home. The dark, rich earth of a forest or prairie is a tapestry of organic matter, roots, decomposed leaves, microbial life, all woven together by the slow work of time. Soil can hold more carbon than the atmosphere and the trees above it combined, a hidden reservoir that pulses with possibility. The way we farm, build and manage land can tip the balance, releasing carbon or capturing it, shaping the very breath of the planet. In the realm of imagination, carbon is a shapeshifter, a trickster, a silent architect. It is the backbone of molecules that spiral into the double helix of DNA, the scaffold of proteins that fold and flex in every cell. It is the thread that binds us to every other living thing, a reminder that, at a fundamental level, we are all kin, all written in the same invisible ink. Across cultures, this kinship has found expression in myth and metaphor. The notion of dust to dust echoes the reality that the atoms in our bodies have cycled through countless forms, perhaps once part of a dinosaur, a tree, a mountain. Indigenous traditions around the world have long recognized the cyclical nature of life and matter, the way everything returns in time to the earth and the sky. Yet, for all its presence, carbon's story is not always easy to see. It moves in rhythms too slow or too small for our eyes to follow. We notice its absence more than its presence, the tree that withers, the soil that erodes, the air that grows heavy with unseen gases. To truly understand the carbon cycle is to learn to read the invisible, to recognize the signs of movement where none seem apparent. Science, in its quest to unveil this hidden world, has given us tools and metaphors, models, diagrams, measurements. We trace the flows of carbon with satellites and sensors, with ice cores and chemical assays. We measure the breath of forests, the uptake of oceans, the slow seep from permafrost. Each data point is a glimpse, a fragment of the greater story. Yet numbers alone cannot capture the wonder of the carbon cycle. To see it whole, we must turn to the language of systems, of interconnectedness, of cycles that have no true beginning or end. Carbon is not just a substance, it is a process, a pattern, a pulse, a rhythm that underlies every heartbeat, every gust of wind, every drop of rain. As you drift into the quiet spaces between waking and sleep, consider how you too are part of this endless migration. The carbon in your breath was once a leaf, a plankton, a spark of ancient fire. The food you eat, the shelter you build, the warmth of your home, all of these are threads in the tapestry of the carbon cycle. You are both author and character in this story, inscribed in the same invisible ink as every living thing. In the world of stories and symbols, carbon is often invoked to speak of permanence or impermanence, of memory or forgetting. The graphite of a pencil can be erased, the marks of time rubbed away. And yet, nothing is truly lost. The atoms persist, moving on, finding new forms, new stories. The world is always being rewritten, always in motion. Perhaps it is this quality, the quiet persistence, the capacity for transformation, that makes carbon so compelling, so central to our sense of what it means to be alive. It is at once ordinary and miraculous, the foundation of cells and stars, of dreams and decay. And so, as the night deepens and the world grows still, the journey of carbon continues. Beneath the silence, beneath the surface, Earth's invisible ink is at work, inscribing new lines, shaping new possibilities. The story unfolds, waiting for the next chapter, waiting for us to follow, step by patient step, into the deeper mysteries of carbon's endless cycle. Beneath the skin of the earth, beneath the green canopies and the restless, sunlit surfaces of our seas, the carbon cycle pulses, a planetary heartbeat, ancient and intricate. Its rhythms span eons and instant, echoing through the crystalline depths of the oceans, threading up through forests, dissipating skyward on the wind, then returning always in infinite forms. In this quiet hour, let us press closer to the hidden machinery of this cycle, tracing its tangled paths. For carbon's journey is a symphony of transformations, each note played by the elements, the living and the stone. Let your mind drift now to the ocean, not merely as a body of water, but as the greatest reservoir of carbon on Earth, silently storing, releasing, and transforming. Here, carbon dwells in three main forms: as dissolved inorganic carbon, like carbon dioxide, bicarbonate, and carbonate ions, mingling invisibly within the brine; as organic carbon, woven into the tissues of plankton and fish, drifting as detritus or sinking as unseen snow; and as the mineral skeletons of marine organisms, calcified vestiges that rain slowly down to the abyss. The ocean's surface and its restless dance with the air above is a site of ceaseless exchange. Carbon dioxide dissolves into the water, driven by winds and temperature, in a process at once delicate and immense. Warm waters tend to relinquish carbon dioxide back to the air, while cold currents, churning up from the deep, draw it in, a silent inhalation. At the edge of light, where sunbeams waltz down into the blue, the great engine of photosynthesis awakens. Here, the phytoplankton, tiny floating plants, each no larger than a grain of dust, harness sunlight to draw carbon dioxide from the water, crafting sugars and new life from the invisible. This process not only feeds multitudes, but also locks away carbon, for when these plankton die, their remains drift downward. Some are devoured, the carbon cycled again through hungry mouths, but much escapes, settling as a slow rain to the twilight below. This is the biological pump, a planet-spanning conveyor belt, carrying carbon away from the surface, sequestering it for centuries or longer in the chilly, inky depths. Yet the ocean is not a system of simple flows. It is a labyrinth, where water masses swirl and overturn, where the carbon taken up by life above may, after a journey of centuries, resurface. Deep currents, shaped by the turning of the planet and the slow creep of continental plates, bring ancient carbon-rich waters back to the top, where they may release their burden once more to the sky. All the while, the chemistry of the sea is altered subtly by this dance. As carbon dioxide dissolves, it forms weak acid, shifting the balance of bicarbonate and carbonate ions, subtly eroding the shells of creatures that rely on them. The balance is delicate, and even small perturbations can ripple through this vast system. Above the waters, the carbon cycle is written in the language of breath. Forests inhale and exhale, drawing in carbon dioxide through countless green stomata, releasing it again through respiration and the slow decay of fallen wood. Here too, photosynthesis forges sugars, building the substance of trunks and leaves, while roots and fungi, in their own twilight world beneath the soil, trade carbon for nutrients, forming intricate alliances. Some of this carbon will remain trapped in the soil, woven into the dark tapestry of humus, a reservoir that may endure for decades or even centuries. Yet much returns to the air, a whisper of each life that once flourished. The cycle does not belong solely to the living. Deep beneath the forests and grasslands, geological processes trace their own slow arcs. Carbon, once locked away in limestone or buried as coal and oil, can re-emerge through the fiery venting of volcanoes, the grinding of tectonic plates, or the steady erosion of rocks. In the mineral world, the carbon atom's journey is measured not in years, but in millennia and beyond. Over time, rainwater, mixed with carbon dioxide from the air, becomes weakly acidic, etching away limestone and carrying dissolved carbon back to the sea. There, it may be taken up by marine organisms, only to be buried once more as sediment, continuing the endless cycle. It is tempting to imagine these processes as neat, a series of steps in a diagram, but the reality is far more tangled, more akin to a dense forest of pathways where each branch leads to new complexity. Consider, for example, the role of fire. In grasslands and forests, the periodic blaze of flames turns organic carbon to ash and gas, releasing a pulse of carbon dioxide and blackening the soil. Fire clears space for new growth, which in turn draws down more carbon, setting the stage for another cycle. Or think of the wetlands, where the decay of plants is slowed by waterlogged soils, allowing carbon to accumulate as peat, a slow, muffled breathing of the land. Then, too, there is the mysterious realm of the permafrost. In the frozen soils of the far north, vast reserves of ancient plant matter lie trapped in ice, preserved for millennia. As the climate warms and these soils thaw, microbes awaken and begin to feast, unleashing a slow but steady flux of carbon dioxide and methane, a greenhouse gas even more potent. This is the carbon cycle's hidden fuse, a feedback whose full effects we are only beginning to understand. Across each of these domains, ocean, land, and the rocks beneath, life and geology are bound together in a complex choreography. The roots of trees fracture stone, releasing minerals and carbon alike. Microbes in the soil break down dead matter, transforming the carbon within into new life, or releasing it as gas. Even the breath of animals, the decay of fallen leaves, the slow weathering of mountain ranges, all are threads in the same web. Human beings, too, are woven into this story, altering the balance through fire, farming, and the unearthing of fossil fuels, adding new, rapid pulses of carbon to ancient, slow cycles. Yet, for all our study, the carbon cycle keeps its secrets. Scientists have mapped its broad contours, measured the fluxes from forest to sky, tracked the drift of carbon in the ocean, charted the burial of carbon in rocks and soils. But within each domain lie uncertainties, delicate balances that can tip with small changes. In the ocean, for instance, the role of marine microbes, the fate of sinking particles, the chemistry of deep currents, all are subjects of ongoing discovery. On land, the fate of soil carbon remains elusive, for the soil is alive with billions of organisms, each contributing in ways we can barely untangle. Even the atmosphere, where satellites sweep and sensors hum, is a realm of shifting patterns as winds and currents carry carbon across the globe. The limits of our understanding are not only technical but conceptual. The carbon cycle is a system of feedbacks, where a change in one part may ripple outward, amplifying or dampening effects elsewhere. Increased carbon dioxide in the air spurs plants to grow faster, drawing down more carbon, but also warms the planet, which may dry soils and unleash stored carbon back to the air. The warming of the ocean can slow its ability to absorb carbon, while also altering the life within, shifting the balance of plankton, fish, and the tiny creatures that build shells. Some feedbacks are stabilizing, others destabilizing, and the net result is a tapestry in constant flux, difficult to predict. The story of carbon's dance is thus not just about movement, but about transformation. Each step in the cycle is an alchemy, where carbon changes form, function, and fate. In the leaf, it becomes sugar, the energy of life. In the microbe, it turns to gas, invisible yet powerful. In the shell, it hardens to stone, a silent record of life's passage. At every stage, there is loss and gain, creation and decay, a process both fragile and resilient. Let us linger for a moment on the subtlety of these exchanges. Every morning, as sunlight returns to the world, a vast number of leaves unfurl in quiet synchrony, opening their stomata to the air. Invisible currents of carbon dioxide flow inward, as each cell begins its daily work, fusing atoms together in the slow, deliberate choreography of photosynthesis. The air itself is changed fractionally by the sum of these countless miniature acts. Meanwhile, in the ocean's vast deserts, blooms of phytoplankton flare and fade, their brief lives capturing pulses of carbon only to be devoured or to sink, carrying their invisible cargo to the dark. Beneath our feet, the soil is alive, a world of roots, worms, fungi and bacteria, each a participant in the carbon cycle's subterranean dance. When a leaf falls and decays, its carbon is not simply lost. Rather, it is transformed, passing through many hands, feeding microbes, binding to minerals, sometimes escaping as gas. In some soils, rich in clay and minerals, carbon may persist for centuries, locked away from the air. In others, it cycles swiftly, returning to the atmosphere in a matter of days or weeks. Even the rocks beneath are active in their own way. Over long spans, the slow weathering of mountains draws carbon from the air, locking it in stone. Volcanoes, in turn, belch carbon back to the sky, closing the loop. The burial of organic matter in sediments, coal, oil, gas, is a kind of planetary savings account, storing carbon away for epochs, until tectonic uplift, erosion, or human hands bring it back to the surface. In all of this, one senses the deep interconnection of the system. A single carbon atom, born in the heart of a star, may journey from air to leaf, from animal to ocean, from shell to stone, and back again to the sky, over and over, for millions of years. Its fate is shaped by biology and geology alike, by the interplay of light, life, and the restless earth itself. As we peer deeper into the carbon cycle, we encounter not only complexity, but also fragility. The balance between storage and release is delicate, a product of countless small processes and large-scale flows. Disturbances, whether natural or human-made, can tip this balance, sometimes in ways that reverberate for centuries. The thawing of permafrost, the acidification of the ocean, the burning of fossil fuels, all are examples of how shifts in one part of the cycle can cascade through the whole. Yet even as we map these pathways, much remains unknown. The ocean's depths are still largely unexplored, the true diversity of soil life only beginning to be revealed. Feedbacks remain mysterious, their strength and sign uncertain. The cycle is not a closed loop, but a living, breathing system, open to change, adaptation, and surprise. In the hush of the night, as the world turns and the carbon cycle continues unseen, we are left with a sense of awe at its intricacy and power. The dance of carbon is at once ancient and ever new, a story that binds all living things to the rocks, the air, and the sea. It is a reminder that we too are part of this great cycle, our breath and bones woven into its endless flow. And so the questions linger, gentle but persistent. How stable is this balance? How might it shift as the world changes? What secrets still lie hidden, waiting to be uncovered in the winding pathways of carbon's journey across Earth? As the night deepens, these mysteries beckon us onward, promising further revelation in the unfolding story of the planet's restless heart. Follow me into the cool, pre-dawn hush of an observatory perched atop Mauna Loa, the broad-shouldered Hawaiian volcano. The air is thin and clean here, far from the bustle of cities, the exhalations of factories, and the breath of forests. It is a place chosen for its distance from the world's complications, a vantage point to listen in on the silent conversations of the atmosphere. Let us stand just for a moment in the company of Charles David Keeling, whose quiet patience and precision, beginning in the late 1950s, would forever change humanity's understanding of carbon's journey. Keeling's story is a quiet revolution. He arrived at the problem with a geochemist's curiosity, but it was his insistence on accuracy that made him a pioneer. Before him, the carbon dioxide in the air was a vague, shifting figure, sometimes guessed, sometimes measured, often doubted. Keeling saw the need for a meticulous, regular record. With glass flasks, valves, and a device called a manometer, he captured the breath of the world, one sample at a time. Each flask, sealed and marked, held a tiny snapshot of the atmosphere's invisible cargo. The air he collected was passed over a chemical solution, which would absorb the carbon dioxide, ever so gently shifting a column of mercury in the manometer. The change in height, measured with a ruler's precision, whispered the concentration of carbon dioxide in parts per million. Keeling's work was slow and repetitive, but it was also powerful. Over months, then years, a pattern emerged. The carbon dioxide in the air danced up and down with the seasons, but beneath the rhythm crept steadily upward. This simple, persistent record, what we now call the Keeling curve, became the world's earliest unambiguous evidence that our atmosphere was changing year by year as humanity's fires grew. But even before Keeling, the search for carbon's secret travels had deep roots. In the 18th and 19th centuries, as chemistry itself was young, scientists puzzled over the invisible gases that made up the air. Joseph Black, in 1754, discovered fixed air, what we now know as carbon dioxide, by heating limestone and observing the gas that bubbled forth. He noted its ability to extinguish a candle, to suffocate a mouse, to turn lime water milky. Later, Antoine Lavoisier, the French father of modern chemistry, traced its role in combustion, showing that burning, breathing, and fermentation all released this mysterious substance. For a while, carbon dioxide was a laboratory curiosity, a ghostly participant in life and death. As the centuries turned, methods grew ever more refined. Chemists learned to weigh, trap, and transform carbon dioxide. They discovered that plants, under the influence of sunlight, could draw the gas from the air and build their own bodies from its carbon. The cycle became clearer. Animals breathed out carbon dioxide, plants breathed it in, and a grand, invisible dance circled on. As our understanding deepened, so too did our desire to measure, to quantify, to know not just that carbon moved, but how much, how fast, and to where. The tools grew in sophistication. Scientists learned to trace carbon not only by its presence, but by its fingerprints, its isotopes. Carbon exists in several isotopic forms: carbon-12, carbon-13, and the rarer radioactive carbon-14. Each has a slightly different mass, a subtle difference that becomes a powerful clue in the hands of a patient investigator. Isotope analysis is a kind of planetary detective work. Plants, during photosynthesis, favor carbon-12, the lighter isotope, over carbon-13. As a result, the ratio of these isotopes in atmospheric carbon dioxide can tell us the source of the carbon, whether it comes from a fossil fuel, a living plant, or the deep ocean. When coal, oil, or natural gas is burned, the carbon released is ancient, devoid of carbon-14, which decays over thousands of years. Thus, by measuring the isotopic signature of the air, almost like reading the faded ink of an old letter, scientists can determine how much of the carbon dioxide comes from fossil sources and how much from the living world. Consider the famous Suess effect, named after Hans Suess, who in the 1950s detected a subtle decline in atmospheric carbon-14. His discovery was a quiet warning. The influx of old radiocarbon-free carbon from fossil fuels was diluting the living signature of the air. This was chemistry as history, as autobiography, the atmosphere itself recording the story of industrial civilization. To pass these faint signals, scientists rely on mass spectrometers, machines that separate atoms and molecules by their mass, counting the rare and the common alike. Samples from air, plants or ice are ionized, accelerated, and flung through magnetic fields, their paths bending ever so slightly according to their weight. Sensitive detectors count the arrivals, tallying the isotopic ratios with exquisite precision. In this way, a breath of air from a mountain top or a sliver of ancient ice can reveal the secrets of centuries past. But there are other, even more poetic methods. Think of tree rings, those annual records etched within the trunks of ancient giants. Each year, as a tree grows, it draws carbon from the air to build new wood. The chemical composition of that wood preserves a record of the atmosphere in that year, a chemical diary of droughts, fires, and changing seasons. Dendrochronologists, those patient readers of tree rings, can extract tiny samples and analyze their isotopic contents, reconstructing the history of carbon's journey through forests and time. In the oldest of trees, some alive for thousands of years, we find a time-lapse portrait of our planet's changing breath. Beyond trees, there are ice cores, cylinders of ancient snow drawn from the depths of Greenland and Antarctica. Each layer of ice traps tiny bubbles of air sealed off from the world for centuries or millennia. When scientists drill deep and retrieve these cores, they are reaching back into time, extracting samples of atmospheres long gone. By analyzing the concentration and isotopic composition of carbon dioxide in these bubbles, they can reconstruct the ebb and flow of the carbon cycle through ice ages and warm periods, across volcanic eruptions, and the rise and fall of forests. The journey of discovery is not confined to the laboratory or the mountaintop. In the modern era, fleets of ships, airplanes, and satellites join the quest. Oceanographers lower bottles and sensors into the depths, following the slow drift of carbon as it enters the sea, dissolves, and is carried by currents to the deep. They deploy floating buoys, equipped with chemical sensors, to measure the pulse of carbon at the surface and far below. These instruments record the sea's ability to absorb and store carbon, to buffer the atmosphere, or at times to release it back. In the sky above, aircraft fly precise transects, sampling the air at many altitudes over forests, cities, and oceans. Instruments called spectrometers and gas analyzers draw in the air, measure its carbon dioxide content, and relay the data to scientists below. Each flight is a moving laboratory, painting three-dimensional portraits of carbon's movement, revealing how weather, vegetation, and human activity shape the invisible tides. Yet, perhaps the most ambitious eyes are those that orbit the Earth itself. Satellites such as NASA's OCO2, orbiting Carbon Observatory 2, peer down with sensitive spectrometers, measuring the faint absorption of sunlight as it passes through the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide, though invisible to our eyes, leaves a distinct mark in the infrared, a subtle dip in the sunlight that reaches the satellite. By mapping these signals across the globe day after day, satellites can track the rise and fall of carbon dioxide with breathtaking precision, identifying sources and sinks, following plumes from burning forests, monitoring the breath of the world's great biomes. All these methods, diverse and ingenious, are united by a single purpose: to follow carbon's journey, to measure its passage from air to leaf, from soil to sea, from fire to stone. Through their combination, we have come to see the carbon cycle not as a vague abstraction, but as a living, breathing system, one that can be watched, mapped, and perhaps guided. The tools themselves are objects of intricate beauty. A flask of air sealed tightly is a time capsule. A mass spectrometer, with its humming pumps and coiled wires, is a modern oracle. Tree rings, ice cores, floating buoys, and satellites, all are instruments in a vast symphony, each capturing a fragment of the carbon cycle's melody. The data they produce, columns of numbers, lines on a graph, swirling maps of color, become the language in which we tell the planet's story. But measurement alone is not enough. With data in hand, scientists must make sense of the countless threads, weaving them into models, mathematical descriptions of how carbon flows through the world. These models are built from the ground up, starting with the physics of photosynthesis, the chemistry of ocean absorption, the biology of soil microbes. They are tested against observations, refined and revised, until they can reproduce not just the present, but the past and, tentatively, the future. Within these models, every process has its place: the opening and closing of leaf stomata, the churning of the ocean's surface, the decay of fallen wood, the burning of coal, all are represented, each affecting the balance of carbon. The models are run on supercomputers, their equations solved over and over, exploring the consequences of droughts, storms, fires, and the rising tides of carbon emissions. Through them we can ask, what if forests grow faster? What if the oceans warm? What if we change the way we live? Yet the models are only as good as the data that feeds them. Here the tools and techniques of carbon study matter deeply. To measure the carbon in a forest, for example, researchers may trek beneath the green cathedral of leaves, measuring the girth and height of trees, estimating their mass, and from that their carbon content. They may sample the soil, analyzing its organic matter, its respiration, its slow release of carbon dioxide. In the oceans, they measure not only the dissolved carbon, but the plankton that fix it, the fishes that eat it, and the currents that carry it away. Some experiments reach the scale of entire ecosystems. In places like Harvard Forest, scientists have enclosed stands of trees in transparent domes, pumping in extra carbon dioxide to simulate the future. They watch how the trees grow, how the soil changes, how the carbon flows. In tall towers rising above forests, sensors sniff the air, measuring the exchange of carbon dioxide between the canopy and the sky. Networks of such towers, scattered across continents, provide real-time data on the pulse of the biosphere. Even the smallest creatures play their part. In laboratories, scientists study the microbes that dwell in soil and water, the fungi that break down dead wood, the tiny engines of decomposition. By labeling carbon molecules with rare isotopes, they can trace their path through food webs, from root to worm to bird to atmosphere. Each experiment, each observation, is a window into the myriad ways that carbon is taken up, transformed, and released. And so, through ingenuity, patience, and a growing arsenal of tools, humanity has learned to follow carbon's journey with ever greater clarity. The story is not yet complete. There are mysteries still, hidden reservoirs, unmeasured flows, unexpected feedbacks. The carbon cycle is vast, and though we have mapped much of its territory, there are frontiers yet to explore. As the world changes, as forests shift and oceans warm, the need for understanding grows ever more urgent. The instruments hum on mountaintops, drift in the sea, spin in orbit, their data streaming silently back to Earth. In laboratories and field stations, in the glow of computer screens, scientists listen for the planet's heartbeat, hoping to decipher its future from the patterns of its breath. The journey continues, unresolved. There are questions yet to be asked, answers yet to be found, and a world whose cycles unfold beneath our watchful gaze. In the quiet hours, as the observatories keep their vigil, new revelations stir just beyond the horizon, waiting to be drawn into the light. There is a music to the world that escapes the ear but not the spirit, an ancient melody sung not in notes but in the ceaseless passage of atoms. And of all the elements that dance in this terrestrial symphony, none has so haunting and versatile a refrain as carbon. It is the backbone of life, the sculptor of landscapes, the silent traveller threading its way through rock, water, air, and flesh. In the slumbering dark of night, as the world slows and the mind drifts, the song of carbon hums all around us, a reflection on cycles, on change, and on the mysterious intimacy between Earth and all that lives upon it. To contemplate the carbon cycle is to gaze into a mirror that reflects time itself. Long before the first forests unfurled their green banners, even before the delicate shells of trilobites sifted silt on Cambrian seafloors, carbon was already weaving its endless circuit. Eons ago, the infant Earth spewed carbon dioxide in volcanic breath, cloaking the skies in a dense primordial shroud. Over epochs, that carbon seeped into oceans, was inhaled by the earliest microbes, and began its role as both architect and archivist of life. With every passing age, the planet's climate, its chemistry, even its very habitability, were shaped by the choices made by carbon atoms, by where they lingered, where they moved, and how they bound themselves to others. The great forests and grasslands, those tapestries of leaf and root, are not merely scenery to this drama. They are the living verses of carbon's song. Each blade of grass, each towering pine draws carbon from the air and binds it into sugar, into wood, into the flesh of browsing deer and the wings of birds. And when these living things fall, crushed by time, consumed by fire, or gently decaying into the patient soil, much of that carbon is returned, exhaled back to the sky, or locked away in the cool darkness of the earth. The cycle is rarely linear, never simple. It is a web, a choreography of return and renewal, of brief imprisonments and sudden release. In the hush of the forest, carbon sings of both permanence and impermanence. But there are also deeper mysteries. Why, in all the universe, does our world alone seem to cradle such a dynamic, carbon-rich biosphere? Carbon, after all, is a common element. It laces the atmospheres of distant planets, forms the dust of interstellar clouds, rains as soot from the tails of comets. Yet only here, as far as we know, has it found the precise, improbable balance between solid, liquid and gas, between the energy of a sun and the chemical ingenuity of life. Carbon's ability to form 4 stable bonds makes it the perfect tinkerer's toolkit, capable of building molecules as simple as methane, as complex as the double helix of DNA. In contemplating this, one feels the weight of both fortune and fragility. Our biosphere is not inevitable, not guaranteed. It is the result of a billion small miracles, a cosmic poem written in the grammar of carbon. Humans, too, are verses in this poem. We are, each of us, arrangements of carbon, bones of calcium and carbon, muscles, brains, and hearts all stitched together by carbon's clever fingers. With each breath, we trade carbon with the world, a gift from the air, a return to it. When we eat, we harvest the sun's energy, stored in edible form by photosynthetic plants. When we speak, laugh, or sleep, we quietly exhale the byproduct of our living chemistry. In the most literal sense, we are part of the cycle. We are both the singers and the song. Yet, in recent centuries, we have become something more. Conductors and disruptors, capable of altering the tempo and timbre of carbon's melody. The story of human civilization is, in many ways, a story of fire, a story of learning to release ancient carbon for warmth, for light, for motion. With the first controlled flames, our ancestors tapped into a slow, natural process, the return of stored carbon from dead wood to the sky. But then, with the rise of industry, we grew bolder. We began to dig and drill, to unearth the carbon hoards buried over millions of years, and to set them aflame in an instant. Coal, oil, and natural gas, these are not just fuels, but fossilized sunlight, the compressed breath of ancient forests and plankton. With every barrel burned, we uncork a bottle sealed in prehistory, releasing carbon that had long been forgotten by the living world. The consequences of this accelerated release reverberate far and wide. The air thickens with carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas that traps the warmth of the sun and slows its escape to the cold void of space. The oceans, those vast blue lungs, draw down some of this excess, but in doing so grow more acidic, threatening the delicate shells and skeletons of marine life. The climate, once stable within comfortable bounds, becomes restless, storms intensify, droughts lengthen, glaciers retreat. The cycle, once a slow and steady exchange, quickens to a fevered pace. The world grows warmer, not by the slow hand of geological time, but by the decisions of living minds. And so we are confronted with a question as old as philosophy itself. What is our place in this cycle? Are we mere passengers, swept along by forces larger than ourselves, or are we stewards, capable of shaping the future of Earth's carbon song? The answer, perhaps, is both and neither. We are unique in our awareness, able to perceive the intricate web of cause and effect, to read the signatures of ancient carbon in tree rings and ice cores. We possess the tools to measure, to predict, and, if we choose, to intervene. But what does intervention look like? The challenge is daunting, for the carbon cycle is not a machine with simple levers, but a living system, deeply complex and interwoven. Yet within this complexity lies hope. If we have learned to disrupt the cycle, perhaps we can also learn to harmonize with it. One strategy is to listen more closely to the wisdom of forests. Trees and soils are the world's great carbon sinks, capable of drawing down vast quantities of atmospheric carbon and storing it in wood, roots, and earth. Reforestation, planting new forests where they have been lost, offers a way to restore some balance. But it is not just about planting trees. It is about nurturing whole ecosystems, encouraging the growth of diverse and resilient communities of plants, fungi, and animals, in tropical rainforests, in temperate woodlands, even in urban parks. Each tree is a small act of carbon stewardship. Agriculture, too, holds promise. By changing the way we farm, by encouraging practices that build up organic matter in soils, cover cropping, reduced tillage, integrating livestock, farmers can help lock away carbon that would otherwise escape. Healthy soils teem with life, and in their dark depths carbon finds a temporary refuge. These methods do not simply sequester carbon, they restore fertility, increase water retention, and revive the ancient partnership between humanity and the land. Then there is the slow, patient work of restoring wetlands and peatlands, those overlooked champions of carbon capture. Beneath their quiet waters, layers of moss and plant matter accumulate, locking carbon away for centuries. Protecting and reviving these habitats is not only a gift to wildlife, but a service to the atmosphere. Some imagine more technological means, machines that filter carbon from the air, or chemical processes that turn carbon dioxide into stone. These are ambitious dreams, promising and fraught, requiring energy, resources, and care. Yet even they are not so different in spirit from the work of a forest. They are attempts to mimic at great scale the subtle artistry of nature. But perhaps the most profound change is not technological, but philosophical. To live well within the carbon cycle is to recognize our kinship with all living things, to appreciate the slow, patient exchanges that sustain life. It is to see ourselves not as separate from the world, but as participants in an ancient, ongoing conversation. Every decision, from the food we eat to the energy we use, becomes part of the story, a verse in the song. There is humility in this perspective, but also empowerment. For while no single action can rewrite the carbon cycle, a chorus of choices sung by millions can reshape the melody. Cities can be designed to be greener, more efficient, more inviting to both people and wildlife. Industries can innovate, capturing emissions, reusing waste, designing products that last rather than those that are quickly discarded. Individuals too can find agency, in what they consume, how they travel, how they vote and dream. The work is not easy, and the challenges are real. There will be setbacks, false starts, moments of despair. The carbon already released cannot be recalled in an instant. The warming already begun will echo through seasons yet to come. Yet, as in all cycles, there is renewal as well as loss. The earth is resilient, and life is adaptable given the chance. In the quiet hours, as the world drifts towards sleep, one might reflect on what it means to be alive at this hinge of history. We have inherited a planet shaped by carbon's slow dance, a world lush and varied, beautiful and bountiful. We have also inherited the power to alter its course, for better or for worse. The responsibility is heavy, but not without hope. Somewhere in the soil, a seed stirs, drawing carbon from the air to build its first tentative root. Somewhere in the ocean, a shell forms, a tiny spiral of calcium and carbon, destined to sink and join the sediments below. Somewhere in your own body, a breath enters, oxygen and carbon dioxide exchanging in the delicate lacework of your lungs. These are not separate events, but threads in a single tapestry, the ongoing song of carbon, threading through all things, binding past and future, atom and idea. As you listen, in the darkness, to the gentle hush of your own breath, imagine that you are part of this ancient melody. Feel the connection to the trees outside, to the distant volcanoes, to the unseen microbes quietly digesting in the soil. Sense the movement, the change, the endless cycle of giving and taking, of loss and renewal. The story is not finished. The next verse is not yet written. There is still time to shape the song, to find harmony, to listen and to act. And so the carbon cycle continues, mysterious, vital, ever-changing, inviting us always to reflect, to wonder, and to belong. As our journey through the delicate dance of carbon drifts to a close, like a comet tail softly fading into the hush of space, may your thoughts gently wander among the whispers of trees and oceans intertwined. Rest easy beneath this vast breathing sky, and return soon for more Dreamtime tales where the universe unfolds its quiet mysteries just for you.